We are live. So, with that great panel today, Dennis, want to lead us off?
Yeah, I want to welcome everyone to the May edition of Legal AI Live, where we kind of share our practical perspectives on what we're doing and what's happening in legal AI, not like the esoteric philosophical stuff, but like what people are actually doing and what they're thinking about. We have another great panel today, and it looked like we had a lot of signups too when I looked at the list. So I'm excited about this. So uh, and we have a really special panelist today. So let's start with Geo first, and then Carolyn, Ben, and Matt.
Hello, everybody. I'm George Bellis, also known as Geo, and there's a story behind that. If you buy me a bourbon, I'll tell you the story. I'm a practicing lawyer. I've been trying to implement and use technology in my practice for the past 53 years in my practice. And it's becoming more and more of a challenge just keeping up. But it's always exciting and always a challenge.
Carolyn.
I'm Carolyn Elephant. I'm also a practicing lawyer. I've been blogging for 22 years or 21 years at myshingle.com. And for the past 2 years, I've been tracking AI and helping to train solo and small firm lawyers on how to use it. I am a power user, and it continues to amaze me with all the little tricks and different things it does. Just when you think you've got it mastered, it takes you for a spin. So I find that very exciting.
Yeah, Carolyn, you're definitely a power user. And we have the amazing, one of my favorite people, Ben Shore, who's able to join us.
Who's Matt?
Well, let's go to Ben first, and then we'll go to Matt. I'm kind of going around the circle that I see. So,
Yeah, good to see you, Dennis. So I'm Ben Shore. I'm not a lawyer, but I've been in legal tech since the late 1980s, and since before Al Gore invented the internet. And it's been a long time. Some of you got that joke. But yeah, so, today actually is my last day at Microsoft working on Copilot.
and Matthew.
Yep. I am Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney. I host a podcast called Law Subscribed, where I talk to lawyers and legal industry folks doing interesting things. Lately, it's all about AI. I'm using AI every day in my practice, and not in my practice, just in my life. Love me some AI.
And I'm Dennis Kennedy. I'm the director of the Center for Law, Technology, and Innovation at Michigan State University. I'm very excited this week to have finished and turned in my grades, both in my AI and the law class at Michigan State. Very excited by what my students were able to do there. And the other class I teach at the University of Michigan Law School, which to people who are familiar with that rivalry means that I need to keep track of what colors I wear depending on where I go. So especially my AI and law class, I like to start out a lot of my classes by saying, what did you try in AI? Just to try to get the students to share some of the things they're doing. And so I like to do that. So I think we can just kind of keep going around the horn, and that will give people come later an idea. But just sort of, what have you done in the last month that you thought was cool, or maybe you thought it was going to be cool and didn't turn out so well that you might want to share? Geo.
Okay, a couple of things. We started using a couple of products to help us prepare for depositions. I was impressed with one product called the Posely. It helped us organize for a deposition. But the most remarkable thing was that it actually second chaired me during the deposition. And as the deponent was testifying, it was giving me cites to his inconsistent and consistent testimony or document. So that was kind of fun. I just had my paralegal check on something. I wanted her to figure out how to do something with e-filing. And I told her what to do. So she went to ChatGPT and corrected me on what my instructions were. So it's nice to see the staff using it, but we're trying to use it all the time. It's a remarkable tool.
And then Carolyn, I think you have a whole list to choose from.
I'm in the middle of a couple of experiments. I've really been trying to replicate how these hallucinations are coming about because I'm so tired of seeing these orders just saying that cases are hallucinating. I want to find out why. Is it user error? Is it something in the technology? So that's a longer thing I'm working on. But yesterday I had a law journal article, a 47-page law journal article on AI and energy law practitioners came out. And even though it's a niche article, I would say that the best practices and ethics are applicable across the board. So the article cites other articles and other authors. And what I want to do is run the article through ChatGPT Deep Research, have it identify each person who I mentioned and pull their email so that I can send them a copy of the article. So that's how I'm going to use that.
Cool. And what about you, Ben?
Well, so I can't talk about stuff I've been doing at work.
Oh, darn it.
but-
I thought maybe.
Yeah, that's all. Still, not unless I want to lose my severance package, but I did have a cool use for ChatGPT. So my wife is from Oregon. They did a family reunion down there, and she and the kids went down a couple days earlier because they have more time on their hands. And I was going to drive down and join them. And I, as some of you know, drive an EV. I drive a Ford Mustang Mach-E. And so this is a road trip that was going to require some charging. So I asked ChatGPT to help me plan the trip with charging stops and so forth. And it did that. It produced a beautiful itinerary of here's the first place to stop, here's the second place to stop, here's the food that's in the area. Because I made that part of the prompt was I wanted to stop and have food while I was charging. And so that was something else it did. It also picked out recommended a hotel near where we were going because we needed a place to stay during the region that had charging at the facility included. So it did a really nice job with all of that. Unfortunately, all of it turned out to be useless. When I arrived at its first charging recommendation in Centralia, Washington, I discovered that the outlet mall that it had recommended for charging didn't have any charging stations. So that was a surprise. Luckily, it was not a big deal because there was chargers nearby. You know, it wasn't too hard to find a nearby charger. And then the hotel it had selected for us did have chargers, but their chargers had been out of order for 2 years. So that wasn't that helpful. But it was a pretty cool experiment. It was impressive to see the output, and it just taught me a lesson about fact checking and not taking its word for it. That without a little bit deeper research, basically the intern gave me its best effort and didn't quite do it this time.
I would say it sort of sounds like about what you might expect if you were asking like a relative who lives sort of around there who was confidently telling you what you needed to do. And
Yeah, kind of. I mean, like the good news is Centralia is not that small a town. There was, half a dozen chargers within half a mile, at various other places. So I just pulled up the PlugShare app and found one, and that worked out fine. And then the hotel thing, I mean, it did have chargers. They just weren't working. So no big deal. I got up a little early the next morning and went and charged at a Starbucks or something nearby that had chargers, and it was fine. But anyway,
Cool. Matthew.
Yeah. So I'm still using a heck of a lot of Perplexity, but what's more interesting in the last month is that I have really been, and this has been available for some time, for I think at least since the beginning of the year, but I didn't play around with it for a while, and that is the interactive mode on Notebook LM Plus. So I don't know if you guys have seen this yet, but when you create an audio summary, and I've been doing this on desktop and mobile and on my iPad, and it works really well. You can click on this interactive mode that's in beta, and I don't know if I only get access to that because that's in the Plus version that I have, because I haven't experimented with just the Gmail version. But it's really phenomenal. And so kind of regardless of, if you listen to like the podcast feature of create a podcast out of any source with Notebook LM, like that's why it went viral. I haven't used that like a lot. I've just been using it for massive data set analysis and data extraction and that kind of thing. But with this audio summary, I just click interact right away. And it's a little confusing. So if the Google folks are listening here, you have to click play. And then you could click join, and I don't even start listening. I just click join right away, and I'm like, oh, hi, I'm Matthew. And I just start having a conversation about the sources that I've included in that notebook with these like 2 AI female and male hosts. And it is unbelievable how useful this is. This is the future of like education and tutors and studying. Like if I'm putting in, if Geo, I highly recommend you consider putting like all the discovery and all your trial materials into, a notebook and just having a conversation with these AI, like they're the most human sounding and interactive AI people that I've been able to interact with. And I could say, like, and you start with material that right? Like I've been putting in slide decks for like some CLEs that I do. I'm acting in a murder mystery sort of improv thing coming up. So I put in the script and I'm like able to ask it, like, what's the motivation behind these characters? What's the relationship behind these? And they tell you based on the sources. And it's really unbelievable just how seamless and interactive it is. And then you could download it. Right, you could download that conversation. You could listen back to it at 2 times speed if you want to listen back to it again. And like this is, I mean, like when my kid's only 4.5, but when she actually has curriculum, like I could, like my mind is spinning with all the possibilities. So very excited about the interactive mode in audio summary or audio overview in Notebook LM Plus.
I think it's so interesting that this voice thing, and we talked about it last month a little bit, that I think there's this new generation of AI users. They're just going to see this as a voice tool and less as a text tool, and it's going to take a little bit of adaptation for each of us. I actually uploaded all of the entire archive of my 22 years of blog posts into Google Notebooks so that I can analyze that. And Ben, you'll like this, that the easiest way to do that was to create in Adobe Acrobat PDFs from the website and just download the whole archive into a PDF, and it just goes right into Google Notebooks. So that's pretty amazing. The thing I've been doing that I like to share with people is that, because I've been doing direct grading and other things, is I continue to use the AI tools, and I'm using 3 or 4 of them now. Even, Matthew's got me going on Perplexity, a lot more. But I use it as a project manager. I say, here's when I'm going to get this grading done. Give me a checklist of all the things I need to do. Map this out. So here's what I need to do this day. Here's how I do that. Here's much time I work. What are the things that are done? And I have that right in front of me, and it just seems super manageable. And I got my grading done early this year, which my students probably like. I go to what seems like, for some reason, a big issue this week, and Carolyn alluded to this, is I'm just seeing so much these days about AIs and or lawyers and AI hallucinated cases. And there's part of me that says, what did the legal profession not get the memo on this hallucination thing? Because I don't see these same stories like in other professions. And I wish I had the quote handy, but certainly the real big moment for me with generative AI was when somebody said the hallucinations are the feature, not the bug. And so all my thinking about looking at how I use and where I use AI is around that. To say, like, if I'm really concerned about hallucination, AI may not be the tool I want to use, and I need to think differently in how I use it. And I sort of have this ongoing question of whether generative AI is actually the right tool for legal research. I mean, I just sort of feel it isn't, that we're going to find some other type of AI or some sort of hybrid that will work better. But what is it that you think out there, and maybe Carolyn, you can talk about some of what you're already seeing about, like, why all of a sudden we're hearing more and more about lawyers citing fake cases and I'd say more importantly, and getting caught doing it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the theories I had on that was that, people have always cited cases incorrectly. I've had briefs that I've responded to where I've actually done a table of 30 cases, that were string cited by the other side just to highlight to the judge how they were wrong. And the courts never cared about it, especially because I was a small firm and this was an Am Law 50 firm mischaracterizing the cases. But so I think there's some element where people have become accustomed to string citing and putting cases in that they don't actually read. And I think AI has drawn attention to that. So now you've got people who are looking at it and looking to capitalize on it. So I think people, ironically, are being more cautious, but at the same time, some users haven't changed their habits and they're getting caught. I know that, I have kind of categorized certain red flags that I identify for AI. So, it will confuse concepts. So if you're talking about like something like content-based discrimination or racial discrimination, it tends to conflate those. So it might cite a case on content-based discrimination as a First Amendment case is, in a due process race discrimination case. So I'm kind of attuned to areas where it's inclined to make errors. And also, in the areas that I research, since I have background, I know where it's likely to make a mistake or to miss a subtlety or something like that. I would disagree with you about its usefulness in legal research, though. I still find that either Perplexity Deep Research or ChatGPT Deep Research is a really good way to get a lay of the land, and it'll cite to different sources. So for example, with that article I was working on, I had to do a section on the delegation doctrine, whether if an agency uses AI to make decisions, if that's a sub-delegation of congressional authority and whether that's consistent with the Constitution and the statute. And it gave a really good overview of the lay of the land. It pointed me to kind of the key cases. And then, it didn't drill down, it didn't do all the subtleties, but it was so much easier than if I'd had to, research that on Lexis or Westlaw, where it just would have come up with a whole bunch of cases and no narrative. So I do think it does have its uses, subject to the caveats of, reading the cases, which is, law school 101,
Exactly.
research 101.
Yeah, Ben, I'm curious about some of your insights on this, because I suspect in the upcoming weeks that you're going to get asked these types of questions a lot.
I suspect so, yes. And I now have the luxury of diving deeper into some of the other AIs as well, and not being focused entirely on our thing. So that helps. Yeah, there were definitely some areas where the AIs are challenged. One of the other mistakes that I've seen them make pretty often is confusing people's roles in an event. So I've seen situations where somebody's name is associated to the event, and that's fine, but then the AI assumes they had a different role than they actually did. In fact, I think I saw one where a reporter who had reported a story on something was incorrectly identified by the AI as the defendant. And and it's just because he had his name in the byline on the story, and the AI just got confused about what his role was. So interesting little things like that. I've seen one of the areas that I've been particularly interested in with AI because of my role is AI with technical content, generating technical content. And one of the things I've discovered is that where you have to be careful is that in technical content and in the law, the facts matter, right? The facts are important. But AIs are often tuned to be readable as much or more than to be accurate. And so oftentimes what happens is the AI will draft something, and in the interest of being readable, it'll change or pick a word that is more readable, but may actually make the content technically inaccurate. And that's something that we have to be careful of and be vigilant about. And one of the challenges there is that sometimes the difference is subtle, and so it could be easily missed. And sometimes the difference is subtle where you might notice the word, but if you don't have the subject matter expertise, you might not recognize that it's technically inaccurate. And so that's another challenge that we have both in technical documentation and I suspect also in producing legal documents too.
Yeah, I think that's where the AIs, Perplexity, Bing AI, it's almost any AIs that connect to the internet tend to disappoint me is in exactly that subtlety, because you'll say, hey, give me step-by-step directions on how to do this thing, say in Microsoft Word or something like that. And it will say, yeah, just go to this menu item and do this. And it's come up with like a different word that reads better. And you're going like, oh yeah, I'm on a Mac. Either did they change the name of this? And then it turns out later that it's different and the directions are wrong, but you're looking for something that isn't there. And it's really subtle, right? But you do run into that.
And there is one other aspect too, and this is especially true in technical documentation, especially these days when the technical reality, the truth on the ground changes so often, right? We've seen in our testing sometimes where we've asked a technical question of the AI how to do a thing, right? And it's given us an answer that was the correct answer 2 versions ago.
Yep.
Right? But it's not the correct answer in today's version. And so much depends on the training material that the AI has, how new that training material is, if the AI is grounding in web, if the AI is not grounding in web. But even there, I can tell you because heck, this was what my team did. Just trying to maintain technical documentation, even public technical documentation to be current and accurate, that is a tough full-time job. And I can assure you, we have 42,000 plus articles in our support system here. I can assure you there's probably a couple of them that are out of date. okay, out of 42,000. We work on it every day, right? We're always chasing stuff down, but I'm sure there are at least one or two that have not been updated since the product changed a month ago or 3 days ago or whatever it was. And so even if the AI is grounding on the web truth of today, the AI could give you an answer that's incorrect. Now, to be fair, if you just went to Google in the way we used to and looked at that article, the article is out of date too. So it's not like you would have gotten a better answer without the AI.
Exactly.
But the AI carries a little bit of sort of imputed authority because it's the AI and you assume it's right. And you shouldn't always. That's why we trust but verify. And I thought I saw Gio put his hand up there.
Yeah.
You know,
Gio.
going to that, I had a colleague who was in San Francisco when the partial lunar eclipse occurred a couple of months ago. And he went on Gemini and asked it for details about where's the best place to see it. I'm in San Francisco, blah, blah, blah. And it gave him real good detailed answer about how to observe it, except that it was for the last partial lunar eclipse a couple of years ago. It did not cover today's partial eclipse. Going back to what Carolyn was talking about, and all of these hallucinations that hit the headlines about lawyers screwing up and filing hallucinated documents, I am blown away that lawyers, the lawyers that we're hearing about are very sophisticated lawyers. There are tools available to them using things like Lexis and Westlaw that will check your citation. And it's amazing to me that they will do that and not throw it into Westlaw and ask Westlaw through its, Precision or Lexis Prestige, whatever the stuff, I forget what the programs are. Because I know, after speaking to a couple of federal district judges, every district court judge has Westlaw on their laptop or their computer, as do all of their clerks. And whenever somebody submits something for filing, the first thing they do is throw it into Westlaw and ask it to check the citation. Now, how stupid is it for a lawyer not to do that?
That's what's so interesting, because the last hallucination case involved Kirkland and Ellis, obviously like a top 10 firm, and they said they were using Westlaw Precision and Co-Counsel. So that's what's kind of terrifying. I mean, if you're going to be paying $650 a month to get a hallucination, and it may have been user error, I can't blame Westlaw, and maybe they said they used it and they actually didn't. Who knows? But I agree. I mean, these are tools that we'd always come to rely on, and it turns out that they're possibly just as error prone as the $20 a month ChatGPT.
Maybe, Carolyn.
Maybe.
Hold on.
So
I have to interrupt here because this is a live thing on LinkedIn. We have two questions in the chat from LinkedIn. So there's a general one from Frank, and then there's one for you, Dennis, from Josh Maley. And so I did put these in our chat on Zoom so you could see these. So maybe, Dennis, since this is directed at you, you could read that question, and then the rest of us, we could answer this general one by Frank. So it's, do you notice a difference between regular ChatGPT hallucinating versus deep research? In Frank's experience, deep research had better results. So while you think about that, because I've had a chance to think about this already, I read the questions ahead of time. I'm not using ChatGPT because it seems everybody else is, so I'll let everybody else bring that experience. And I'm using it when it's when a tool is multi-model. But I find in Perplexity that deep research does sometimes do a really better job on particular topics that are not about people. The moment I start asking deep research about people, if there's even a similar name, I actually find that it starts to get inaccurate information. But I have found deep research has gotten a little bit better compared to Perplexity Pro on particular topics. But I know this is like the environmentalist in me is like, what am I doing here? But I run a side-by-side Perplexity Pro and Perplexity Deep Research search just to see the difference. And I almost always continue in my Perplexity Deep Research query these days. Like within the last few weeks, I've just been continuing. So I might just start in Perplexity Deep Research if the sort of inquiry requires it, because I find it is more useful unless I'm asking about a person. That's been my experience.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on something that judges and their clerks, the first thing they do is to throw the cases cited in briefs into Westlaw to check whether they're really real. That tells me that this is a much, much, much bigger problem than a little bit of AI. And I'm also surprised that with tools out there like ClearBrief, that lawyers aren't using that, because that is, I mean, it's not the solution to the problem, but that's going to be a gigantic help. But to me, it just sounds like that lawyers make up cases all the time, and that the judges feel it's part of their job to try to they almost have to go from fresh to determine what to do. So it's sort of like we're blaming AI for what's already a bad habit. I'm going to take a little bit of contrary position on the deep research. Is that, and it could be part of the way that I use AI and the way that I prompt. So take that as a given. But I find where I see hallucinations a lot is in the deep research and anything that connects to the internet. And that includes perplexity. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's less subtle. But I think that's out there once you go to the internet. And I'll give one more story, and then I'll turn it over to somebody else. Is that about a year or so ago, back in the primitive days of AI, I did something where I wanted to do a draft of like a marketing piece for what I was doing for the center that I run. And it gave an example of an article that I wrote that year that I should include in this marketing piece. And I hadn't written the article, although it did sound like something I could have written. And then it was from a journal that doesn't exist. And so I said, this is kind of interesting. So I started to work with it, and I said, give me a summary of what that article says. And I kind of started to work with it and to say, like, if Dennis Kennedy were writing this article, what would it say? And I ended up saying, like, do a 2,000-word version of what this article might be. And it produced something. And that experiment itself was really cool. But it taught me something about the hallucination piece. And this is why I'm like a little wary of, when I say, I agree with Carolyn. I think that the AI can do a lot in litigation and brief writing and that sort of thing. I think to rely on it, unless it's tailored, like something like ClearBrief for citation checking, I really struggle with whether it's the right tool.
That ends part 1 of this month's Legal AI Live. Make sure to subscribe to the new Legal AI Live podcast at www.legalailive.com to make sure that you don't miss part 2.